Hello again, everyone. So, today we're going to look a little bit more into angles. We looked at them briefly for a second, but now we're really going to kind of get into them and take a look. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So, an angle is formed by two rays. And these rays have a common endpoint. So if we look over here at our picture, this is a picture of an angle. It's measuring at 60 degrees, but it is made up of ray BA and ray BC. Remember, rays start at one point, continue through another point, and keep on going in one direction. So an angle is made up of two rays. The common endpoint, or the endpoint they share, would be point B. Okay. The common endpoint is called the vertex of your angle. Okay. The common endpoint is called the vertex. So point B here is called our vertex of our angle. The rays that I colored blue and green are called the sides of my angle. Now, when you name an angle, there's actually three different ways you can name an angle. You can name an angle with one letter or three letters. Okay. If you do name it with three letters, then the middle letter must be the vertex. Okay. The other thing is, if you're going to use one letter, you only want to use one letter if there's only one angle. Okay. And we'll see that happen later on. And then the last little piece of information, when you when you refer to the measure of an angle, okay, you use the lowercase m. So if you look right here, you're going to use a lowercase m. Okay. So in other words, if I wanted to say how much this angle measures, we would say, see the lowercase m right there? The measure of angle ABC is equal to 60 degrees. Okay, because remember, angles are measured in degrees. Okay, you might want to make a note of that. Angles, that's your symbol for angles, are measured in, running out of room. Let's squeeze this in, degrees. Okay, so that's not some weird writing right there. It's not m less than. Okay, that's the measure of, just so we can read this correctly, that's what that little m stands for. Angle ABC equals 60, and that little circle above 60 means degrees. So that's how you would read that. The measure of angle ABC equals 60 degrees. Now, you've seen this at some point in your math journey through school, but there are different types of angles. Okay. The first kind is an acute angle. Okay. Acute angles measure less than 90 degrees. Okay. Okay. The next kind of angle we have is called an obtuse angle. An obtuse angle measures greater than 90 degrees, but less than 180 degrees. Okay, and if you're like me and you're right big, these little boxes are not it. Okay, and that's an 8. So let's try to make that look more like an 8. Well, let's just erase that. Try that again. All right, so it's greater than 90 degrees and less than 180 degrees. All right. The third type of angle that we will see is a right angle. And right angles measure exactly 90 degrees. Okay, and they will indicate that to you by putting this little box in the corner. And it looks like a corner. That's a 90-degree angle. And then the last one is what we call a straight angle. A straight angle measures exactly 180 degrees. So, okay, we will be seeing those types of angles. So, let's look at example 1 and kind of walk through the questions. Name the vertex. So remember, the vertex is the common endpoint of your two rays. So you come over here and you look. This is an angle. The angle part of it's right here. Okay, and sometimes people have a hard time finding that, so we always tell them to trace the angle with their pencil or their finger, and then whatever inside is the actual angle measurement that you're looking for. So there's my angle. So your vertex is where your two rays meet, the point they have in common. So here's my one side. Here's my other side of my angle. So point K is my vertex. Now, they want us to name the sides. So I kind of already did that. We said this side on the top is ray KL. And you'd have to say KL, not LK, because it starts at K, goes through L. And the other side would be ray KJ. All right, so part C says, give 3 ways to name the angle. So here's where you got to be careful. When you name an angle, you can name it with one letter, which is the vertex. You can name it with the three points on the angle, with the middle letter being your vertex. And sometimes they will have just a number, okay, like a 1, okay, which doesn't have a degree symbol. And so we're actually going to add that. Sometimes they'll have a number inside. So one way would be to name it with the number, okay, which was not on the picture, but we added it. You can also name it with your vertex. We've already said the vertex is point K. So if we're going to call it an angle, we call it angle K. And use that symbol. That is your angle symbol. The next way is to use 3 points that are on your angle. One of the middle one has to be your vertex. And so this is where we always tell people, be careful. Walk the angle. Okay? Meaning trace it with your pencil, trace it with your finger, but start on either side and go this way. So we could call this angle JKL. Notice my vertex is the middle letter. It needs to be. Or you could actually go the other way, LKJ. Again, vertex is still the middle letter, and it needs to be. But those 4, and I probably should have put in an angle symbol here, sorry. Those are 4 ways to name the same angle. So again, like we talked about the other day, you may be right. It may not match your classmates. Before you erase or think you did something wrong, just ask. Because, again, a couple different ways you could actually name that angle correctly. And part D says classify the angle. So they want to know, is it acute, which is that it's less than 90. And if you need a visual, that means it would be smaller than this right angle. Okay, right angle makes a corner. Is it obtuse, which means it's bigger than a right angle, but smaller than a straight angle? Or is it a corner? Is it a right angle? Or does it make a completely straight line, which would be a straight angle? And so again, if we look at our picture, take some of this stuff off. If we look at it, let's do purple. This right here, okay, and we're looking at that. That would be an obtuse angle. Okay, it's clearly bigger than a right angle. Okay, because again, a right angle would look something like that, but it's definitely smaller than a straight angle. So that would make it obtuse. All right, let's look at example 2. Name the vertex. Again, the vertex is where your two sides meet, or your two rays meet. So there's one of your rays. Here's your other ray. It's the endpoint they have in common. The endpoint they have in common is point S. So that would be my vertex. Now, let's name the sides. So again, if you look at what I traced in green, that would be ray ST, got to start at S, and ray SR. You have to start at their common endpoint. Now, we're only going to name this angle 3 ways. Okay, I did show you the number in example 1. I'm not going to put a number in this one. So remember, you can always start with your vertex. So you could call this angle S. And then you can use the 3 letters, okay, 3 points, one of them being your vertex. Your vertex has to go in the middle. So we could start at R, go down to S, go up to T. So we could say angle RST. Always verify, is your vertex the middle letter? Yes? Good, you wrote it right. Or we could reverse that. We could say TSR. Again, is your vertex the middle letter? Yes, good, you wrote it correctly. And part D, classify the angle. Well, hopefully everybody sees this box right here. And they're trying to tell us that this is a 90-degree angle with that box. That's what that little notation means. So this would be a right angle. The last thing we're going to look at is just a vocab word. Okay. So congruent, and you're going to see this a lot in geometry. We use the word congruent over and over and over again, okay? And angles are not the only thing that can be congruent. Okay, so angles are congruent if they have the same measure. And they don't leave us a lot of room in this book. So if two angles, I'm just going to write above the line, have the same measure, then they are congruent. And again, you'll see we're going to have congruent triangles, we can have congruent segments, congruent three-dimensional shapes. So for angles, if they have the same measure, then they're congruent. The symbol for congruent looks like an equal sign, but then we put this little squiggly above it. So if we look over here, the example that they're giving us, I notice angle A measures 75 degrees and angle B measures 75 degrees. They measure exactly the same. So what I can say is angle A is congruent to, and this is how you would write that, angle B. Okay, or you could write it angle B is congruent to angle A. But that's how they would write that. A lot of times they won't even put the numbers on that. They'll just start you out from the beginning and saying, hey, A is congruent to B. And what that means to you is that they have the same measure. All right, keep that out. We're going to do a little practice with that, naming angles, naming the sides, finding some rays. And so you may want to keep that out so that you can refer to it. And as always, if you ever have a question, please don't hesitate to ask myself or Mrs. Witcher.